everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. My name is Workneh. I'm Associate Professor of Communication at the School of Communication Studies. We have been doing this for the past, 6 weeks. Although I was not here for the first week, I hope I caught up. Today, I'm going to talk about my project, Science and Dialogue. I have always been thinking about this idea, but I think, the opportunity presented itself when my school moved into what's now, I think, the Sciences and Humanities College. I have been noticing in the past 10, 15 years, there is an increasing interest and investment of all sorts into STEM education and generally science, not only in the United States, but also, everywhere in the world, right? So while that is a very interesting trajectory, by the same token, we are noticing a heightened and increased sense of science skepticism, right? So it's really two different trajectories happening, sometimes in an inexplicable way. And for me, thinking about this led me to think about, okay, like if we are continuing to invest in science, we should have a more positive trust on what it does, but we are going the other direction, and what can we do about it within all our own environments and communities, and for me that is can't say, right? So in doing so, I'm driven by this question of how might we make complex scientific problems like, wildfires, water pollution, climate change, relatable through storytelling and drive global empathy. And I think at the core of this is the question of communication, right? There is a trust broken between producers of science and, for lack of a better word, users or consumers of science. So the project I have in mind, provisionally I call it Science and Dialogue. It is part of a broader project that looks into how can we prepare our students to serve the community better. And in that sense, I think I'm speaking for the entire academia and higher ed. And I think it's fair to say higher ed in some cases is in crisis. And the way I see the primary way we can get out of it is through community engagement, so that, people in communities see our relevance. And I think, our students play a prominent role in that, and they should partake into the research we do, the scholarship we do, and the teaching we do. A key premise I have in this is the idea that science does not exist in a vacuum. It is deeply embedded in culture and community. And sometimes people may not know how, their beer ferments. Sometimes they may not know how, when they're cooking, their bread rises. But even if they don't know the details of, the scientific interaction, the chemistry, they know it works, right? We have a lot of indigenous knowledge systems in the world that communities may not know how to explain, but they know they work, right? And that's why science shouldn't be this one transaction of information from the producers of it to the users. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the spectrum of science skepticism. And I think when you look at it from the perspective of the science public, what we are experiencing is an institutional isolation, right? We talk to each other as academicians and as scientists. And, we see ourselves mostly as, or scientists see themselves as knowledge producers. And there is the deficit mindset, which is treating the public as passive vessels, expecting them to simply absorb complex ideas without cultural context. And then on the other side, we do have the skeptical public or the consumer audience that is highly susceptible for misinformation and conspiracy theories. And in between, we have what I call the empathy deficit, that trust broken between these two communities, scientists lacking narrative empathy to frame facts contextually, while the public lacks methodological trust to accept raw data. And this is not just, anecdotal. I got these screenshots from Harvard Medical Science Journal, and what you see is since 2020, across all population demographic, there is less and less distrust in science. And you think sometimes, okay, this is maybe affiliated political parties and political views. That's not true. Across all political spectrums for varying different reasons, belief in hospitals and doctors, scientists, researchers, and other scientific communities is declining. Right. So what I'm trying to do is not throw a broad blanket into solving this problem. A lot of smarter people are trying to do that, but I'm trying to think about our own students and communities at Kent State. And I'm trying to ask this question of why do dialogue in communication matter in repairing trust in science? Because I'm situating these two as my central elements into what I'm doing. One of the things that I found out in my own pedagogy, most of our curriculum in the sciences suffers from what I call the deficit model and the siloed curriculum. And by that, I mean, there is the knowledge gap assumption, which treats communication as a one-way transfer of facts, like I said earlier, to the passive public. And they don't have strictly siloed skill sets, meaning there are hyper-focused technical rigor skill sets, which isolate students from relational, ethical, affective frameworks cultivated in the humanities. And finally, this results in the communication crisis, meaning graduates are highly proficient technically, but they lack the communication skill set that breaks it down to everyday users and henceforth increase community engagement. What I'm proposing is having a STEAM mindset where we include and integrate the humanities to build capacity. And this gives us a holistic integration, infusing arts and humanities into STEM, providing vital conceptual frameworks for organizing information and framing human-centric narratives. I'm also thinking about here multimodal and dialogic communication, which teaches students to convey ideas through visual design, storytelling, and ethical reasoning. And finally, a synergy that produces scientists equipped with critical thinking and cultural input. And for me, where I find all of these housed together is this idea of phenomenon-based learning. Some of you may be familiar with it. It was popularized mainly in Finland in the early 2000s, where there was less emphasis on disciplines and more emphasis on a phenomenon where everyone can gather together to work on a phenomenon and understanding complex problems. So typically, PHBL includes interdisciplinarity by design, and it is inquiry-driven and also experiential and applied. And what that may mean in this course I'm trying to develop, Science and Dialogue, is where students are going to do a study abroad or a study away program. And in my case, I prefer a study away program within the United States because study abroad programs mostly are cost prohibitive and they are very expensive and are not accessible. So a study away program would give immersive environments in scientific contexts, and it will include, a STEM cohort of health sciences, engineering, also digital media and communication, where I'm at, humanities and liberal arts, and really a truly transdisciplinary collaboration. And some examples of these valuable phenomena that can be studied and looked at in different cohorts and different study away programs include marine biology ecosystems, river basin sanitation, wildfires and ecology, climate change impacts, and so on and so forth. Which brings me to what the course constitutes in terms of its key elements, and obviously science is the key part. But then storytelling is another, because this is where we feel that communicative deficit gap, right? And then what brings me to the DI hub, and what I feel is a component that most students would appreciate is the idea of making, right? And all these together contribute to this idea of phenomenon-based learning. So I'm going to give you some highlight of what this course may look like. These are 8 different students coming from 8 different backgrounds: marine biology, environmental engineering, anthropology, digital media, fashion design. If you see, for example, Diego, who's a fashion design major, in this project, he could develop prototypes for sustainable coral-safe dive wear using recycled ocean plastics and eco-friendly biomaterials. I forgot to mention, that for this hypothetical course, the focus is coral reef resilience, right? Another student, in this case, Amira, who is in translation studies, could translate indigenous Hawaiian ecological terminology and field research text for global scientific dissemination, right? So all of them do have one or another way of making. And this could happen prior to the course. This could happen post-course experience. But all this is to say, a phenomenon-based learning on coral reef resilience will put together a group of students who could put their expertise, but at the same time learn from one another. And for me, the challenge was, how could I demonstrate that in doing so, when students participate in this project, how can they participate in the making process? Because what I discover and find out is, like, thinking about, for example, design innovation hub, right? If you ask, someone who's passing by what we are doing here, usually it doesn't seem it's accessible, right? Like, for people, design is something for designers, right? But what we are learning here is about, human-centered design and its accessibility and whatnot. And that's what I want to communicate to my students. And most of us understand gamifying education is quite an interesting way of increasing attention and interaction. And in this case, what I'm proposing is to put together a wooden map where we have detachable states and where, we can affix some kind of digital data and information where, students can interact with it, or other members of the community can interact with it. And because it was easier for me to demonstrate, for now I chose how we can learn about data center from these different map pieces. But the problem I had, and I think this is one of the uses of participating in this kind of program, is I was a little bit ambitious. This map I had, it was about 70 by 40 inches, very big, and it had a purpose. But then, throughout the different conversations we had, how will we know it will succeed, right? And I think that's when the idea of, let's instead do something smaller that we can test, that I can test in my classes during the fall semester, and see if I can make necessary adjustments in the future. That's when we got to work. I would like to give a shout out to Chris, who really helped me with putting this together. So this is the mini design that you see here. And in this mini design, we have all detachable, states that are cut out of wood. And in the back, what you see is a QR code. And when you scan it, it's going to take you to a website that shows you data centers in the United States, their intensity, and who they belong to. So this is very basic information, but the idea is, in the future, if we have enough students who can work on an independent website, we can curate a lot of information, not only about where these data centers are, but how they are impacting the communities around. And this data can easily be changed into marine biology, into wildfires, into any other kind of scientific inquiry we would like to look at, right? And I want to emphasize that, not all students will have to do this. This is just a way of showing what they potentially can do. So I'm going to distribute this. If you want to take a look at, you can take your mobile phones out, scan this, and see, what it's going to display. Project. Thank you. I think I haven't made, all the states because I had a problem of I actually lost Rhode Island, I feel like. I did, yeah. I did lose it. So we got to work, and I kind of got help from my daughter too, who was really excited about. She did all the coloring. Um, and what you see now looks like this. Um, but it still needs, a lot of work, but it gives you the idea of how I'm going to gamify this experience for anyone who wants to interact with the data, right? So when you go ahead and you scan it, what you see right now is just basic data. Like this is for California that shows the intensity of and frequency of data centers. And then if you click on each one of these, you will see where it is, the address where it belongs. But the idea is to expand this to incorporate so much more. If and when I finally build this big map, it's going to have multiple utilities. The way I see it, one of its utilities is serving as a recruitment tool. It's going to be an aesthetically artistic and scientifically robust sort of showstopper designed to attract prospective students. But at the same time, I don't want it to just be something that people look at. It should be like a data canvas, something reusable, interactive map interface enabling students and faculty to seamlessly overlay diverse data sets. They can just scrap it. And if they are interested in reverse annotation, another student group can work on that. And finally, I see it as a sort of making specimen. And I think this is the most important part for me, where any student who didn't have a design experience but wants to participate can look into it and say, hey, this is something we can make, and this is something we can do, right? And here I'm going to briefly address how a typical student going through this experience would go through this journey from ideation to implementation. So for this course, we have an onboarding process that is going to be followed by the fieldwork itself. And then, these multiple students from diverse perspectives would work together, sharing ideas, followed by the making process. Here I have, it's very difficult because making necessarily does not happen here. It could happen at the beginning. It could happen at the end, depending on the project. But this is one model that I have in mind for now. And then storytelling, and finally, reflection, right? What did we do? What can we learn from it? And how can we improve it? And finally, I'm going to talk about my own process going into this project next year, which is going to start first by assessing, meaning inventory of existing study abroad courses, and if there are any intersections or departures, then testing this, this map I showed you by using the classes I teach in the fall, and making the bigger project, collaborating, which is where actually I'm going to need a lot of recommendations across the sciences. If there is anyone interested in doing this together, I would appreciate it, because, I do not have the scientific skill sets. I am, a communication scholar. And then refining includes putting together the resources we need for the course, syllabus, materials, and other logistics. Implementing is the actual delivery, and finally evaluating on whether the course has produced the intended impact that we wanted it to produce. This is the idea I have in terms of exhibiting this work. We have a biannual communication in action workshop where students demonstrate their work. I think this is an ideal scenario because the students are, the community we are trying to reach out and incorporate. But at the same time, I'm interested in exploring other options, and I'm happy to hear suggestions. The International Communication Association, where I'm a member at, has an instruction design division, and they are very amenable and interested in innovative ways of pedagogy, and that's another venue I'm trying to share my ideas and receive feedback. Thank you. economic interesting.
Very. Yeah. Thank you for
Thank you.
I was curious, maybe this is a meta level question,
Yeah.
but as you develop this, do you find it's a challenge to communicate what this is to scientists and to STEM folks? Different than, say, humanities or other people that you can do about this?
Yes, and I think it goes kind of both ways, to be honest. And I think what I'm at least noticing is there's an increasing divide between the way we think from the humanistic perspective and the way we think from the scientific perspective, right? And these communities increasingly are not interacting. And that lack of interaction is the heart of what I'm trying to do here. And there is an increasing recognition within the scientific community. This is a problem. And in fact, most of, I know the grants are going away, but at least, the ones, that are accessible seem to hinge on this idea of science communication, right? Not only just funding the projects, but how do we make it accessible to everyday, communities? So I wouldn't say it's only on, scientists or people who do the humanities. It is a problem across the board, and there is a lot of skepticism within the humanities on the sciences too, right? And I think that's a problem. And I feel like, having that space for everyone to work together, and the reason I'm choosing this phenomenon-based learning is it breaks that barrier. Yeah, Chris, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think as educators, we all see the value in this kind of concept. What is your pitch to the students, especially if they're not in the science field, like you're a fashion designer? What makes them interested in this course?
Yes, I think, I usually like to frame this as, if you really look into the world we live in today, for most of us, regardless of where we come from, we understand we live in a very complex time, right? Like, just think about the internet, for example, right? If someone, asks you to talk about the internet, you can say a few things, but then before you know it, you need more than a few minutes or even an hour to continue talking. And I think, that gives you an idea of how complex this is, and everyone understands that. And I think for me, the pitch to students is, if you really want to be successful navigating your careers in the future and offer solutions that are sustainable, robust, comprehensive, complex problems require complex solutions, right? You cannot compartmentalize yourself and offer solutions that are not sustainable. And I think, in my own experience, I haven't really engaged with science communication courses so far, but I taught other courses, like, for example, in food and communication. And we do something similar where there is a heavy element of community engagement. And by the beginning of the course, I have to admit it's like you said, there is a lot of misunderstanding on, okay, what am I going to do in this course and in this project? But by the end, after all forms of iterations that we go through, they see the value of engaging multiple actors and communities. And oftentimes it's a journey. Like, it's not something you can tell and you have your aha moment, right? But I do understand that that's a key challenge.